I signed away everything the day I realized the truth was never meant to be loud. When my husband died, the house felt hollow, like it was holding its breath, waiting for a verdict I didn't yet understand. His children arrived before the funeral flowers wilted, speaking in polite tones sharpened by urgency. They wanted the estate, the company, every account, all as their father intended. I listened, nodding, my grief a perfect disguise. What they didn't know was that during my husband's final weeks, when the machines hummed louder than our conversations, he asked me to promise something strange: let them think they've won. At the time, I thought it was the morphine talking. But later, while sorting through his study, I found a locked drawer I'd never seen open. Inside was a thin folder labeled only with today's date. No explanation. Just legal drafts, signatures prepared, and a clause that felt like a whisper: activation upon voluntary surrender. My lawyer nearly shouted when I showed him. "You can't give this away," he said. But my husband's handwriting haunted me from the margins: trust the timing. So when his kids demanded everything in a single sweeping settlement, I surprised even myself by agreeing. Their relief was immediate, almost celebratory. Mine was quieter. I signed, feeling not loss, but alignment. Somewhere beneath the grief and paperwork, a mechanism had already begun turning, and I was the only one who knew it was meant to. The courtroom air was too clean, too bright, like it wanted to erase history the moment ink hit paper. I sat between my lawyer and a silence that felt rehearsed. My husband's children avoided my eyes, whispering to their attorney, already tasting victory. I kept thinking about the folder, about what wasn't written as much as what was. That activation clause pulsed in my memory. My lawyer leaned in one last time, voice tight. "This is irreversible." I almost laughed. Nothing about my husband was ever that simple. When the documents slid in front of me, my hands were steady. I signed each page carefully, remembering the night he pressed that promise into my palm. Let them have it. The opposing attorney skimmed the final page, confident, until he stopped. His posture changed first. Then his color. He reread the paragraph, lips moving slightly, and I saw the realization land. The settlement didn't just transfer ownership, it triggered a dormant restructuring my husband had embedded months earlier. Assets rerouted, liabilities awakened, operational control shifted into a trust bound by conditions only now in effect. The children were smiling at me, thanking me even, unaware their lawyer was suddenly fighting the urge to interrupt proceedings. Our eyes met for a brief second. He knew I knew. The judge called the agreement complete. Applause murmured. To everyone else, it looked like generosity or surrender. But as I stood, I felt the quiet click of a lock turning somewhere far deeper than the courtroom, and the consequences were only beginning to surface. The calls started before I reached the parking lot. My phone vibrated in sharp bursts, my lawyer, an unknown number, then the company's compliance office. I let them stack. I wanted one quiet minute to feel what I'd done. Relief wasn't the word. It was more like stepping off a path I'd been walking blind and realizing the ground had always been solid. When I finally answered, my lawyer sounded breathless. "The trust just executed," he said. Everything operational moved into a conditional structure. They own the shell, but the obligations, they're tied to performance clauses. My husband's voice echoed in my memory: "They must understand stewardship, not possession." I sat in the car, heart steady, while the picture formed. The company's debts, long dormant, strategically deferred, now required active management. The estate properties transferred with maintenance covenants that demanded reinvestment, not liquidation. And the trust? It granted me oversight authority only if the primary holders failed compliance. I hadn't taken anything. I'd simply agreed to his final lesson. Hours later, I received a message from his eldest child, confusion disguised as accusation. "What did you do?" I stared at the words, feeling grief twist with something gentler. I hadn't trapped them. He hadn't either. He'd built a test, one that revealed intention through pressure. That night, I opened the folder again. A final handwritten note waited on the back page: if they learn to carry it, help them. If they try to escape it, protect what matters. For the first time since his death, I cried without restraint, not from loss, but from understanding. The unraveling wasn't dramatic. It was procedural, relentless, and deeply human. Within weeks, the children began missing, deadlines buried inside the transfer conditions. Vendor contracts demanded renegotiation. Properties required capital they hadn't anticipated. Every shortcut tightened the structure around them. The trust responded automatically: warnings, corrective notices, escalating oversight. My phone rang daily, their frustration softening into something closer to desperation. When they finally asked to meet, I saw exhaustion where triumph had been. We sat in the same study where I'd found the folder. They expected confrontation. Instead, I slid my husband's note across the desk. Silence filled the room as they read. The anger drained first, replaced by something fragile: realization. They hadn't been punished, they'd been entrusted with responsibility they never bothered to understand. I explained the oversight clause, how I could stabilize operations if they agreed to work within the structure, not against it. Pride wrestled with practicality. Eventually, they nodded. The months that followed were difficult but honest. We rebuilt vendor relationships, reorganized cash flow, and restored the properties piece by piece. They learned the weight behind ownership, and I learned that grief could evolve into purpose. The trust never needed to seize control, compliance came through cooperation. On the anniversary of my husband's death, we stood together in the office he built. No one spoke about victory. There wasn't one. There was only continuity, his legacy intact, not because someone won, but because we finally understood what it required to carry it.